Yeah.
I think I'm going to read Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky.
Right.
No, don't do it. Just
That's right.
read Tolstoy first, maybe, or something.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You are in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with the Core Four. Glad to have everybody back. Martin, Tanya, and Paul. Yeah. Quiet morning.
We're here. Yeah.
Recording this in the morning and it's early. Well, today we're going to cover what everybody's reading, as usual. We're going to answer a listener question and then back to books. We're going to talk about some book lists because we get that question often and we wanted to just categorically talk about our book lists. But what are we reading for fun? Paul?
For fun, I just picked up a book Kathy Becker gave me, which was a compendium of Louis L'Amour short stories, which are just nice as you go to bed. You know, a 20-pager.
You can start it and finish it.
You can start it and finish it. That's right. That's very nice. For fun, that's what I'm doing. But I'm getting more into, my wife and I, we got rid of all social media on our phones. And so now it's like you wake up and we're like, we're not going to look at our phones first thing in the morning.
You mean there's not going to be any more pictures of cute animals?
On
Oh,
Dancing
no,
Acres?
actually, no. On the farm, you can post without, like you can have the business version, so you can post that doesn't give you the option to scroll.
Oh.
So you can't consume.
Okay.
So Sarah's doing that.
Okay.
But you will keep seeing.
Spring on the farm. We got to see.
Because
beautiful
I love the pictures of the animals.
But it does mean that, like, this morning I got up and I was like, well, I got 15 more minutes than I normally do. I'm going to sit down and read. So that's nice. It's very nice to, normally this time of year I'd have no time to read because any like downtime, I'm just like crashing on the couch
And scrolling.
and I'm no
It's
longer
easier
doing that.
than picking up a book.
Yes, but now that I'm making a priority of having like a fun book, that at least I'm picking up a book if it's not, something that's hugely mentally taxing.
Yeah, there's sometimes, especially with the kind of work that we do, there are times when I come home from work and I couldn't read like The Name of the Rose that has so much philosophy in it, and it really takes my brain power, and I don't have any left. So at that point, I pick up Mick Herron and read a spy novel. But I am reading both of them at the same time, which does make me nervous. I don't like that, but I'm doing it because I also have recognized that there are times when my brain just doesn't want to. I just need, and I felt guilty about that. Like I should be reading something that is going to edify me rather than just entertain me. But I'm trying to throw that guilt off because really you do need. I could be watching TV. And that would be, I don't feel guilty about watching TV rather than reading an edifying academic book.
Right.
But for some reason, I feel guilty about picking up a book that's just pure entertainment. So I'm trying to
get over
change.
that.
Yes. Mentally.
I need a list. Speaking of book lists, I need a list of adventure books.
Have you read all the Sabatini? You love Sabatini.
I haven't, but the problem is it's really hard to like go find those online. Like used books, like if you go to a used bookstore, that's something I'll always look for.
Right.
But it's, I got online and I was like, let me find all the Sabatini books. And really they're just selling like Captain Blood and Scaramouche and
oh, that's terrible.
The Seahawk. Those are like the three that you find all the time. And there's a whole other slew of them.
And you gotta go into used bookstores and try to find
right. But then also like I need to just create a compendium of authors like him that then anytime I go to a used bookstore I could find them because I don't want the modern stuff.
Right.
But which every once in a while I try,
adventure.
But I do like good adventure stories.
Have you read Horatio Hornblower?
Oh no, that's a good one.
Need
I should
to read
write that down.
book.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Those are really good.
And it's a whole series.
Yes.
Yes, we have because it's on our summer reading list now for, I think, rising 8th grade students. And Cheryl had it on there for years, and I was like, yuck, yuck, yuck. Who wants to read a book about a boat and people on the boat? But then when I read, so I thought, well, I better read this because we're putting it on the summer reading list. And I felt obligated. And it's just wonderful. And it's a great book for rising young men.
Mhm, absolutely.
But it's got, I mean,
Like
it's
me.
for,
I mean, that's why you
for
recommend it
girls.
to me, right?
Yeah, right. Let's see, a little gray there.
Well, and just so people know, those books are loosely based on the life of Lord Nelson,
Right.
the hero of the Battle of Trafalgar, who dies right as the battle is won.
Mm.
And it's loosely based on his life as he makes his way up through the ranks of the Royal Navy.
Mm.
And the books are not written in the chronological order, like Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, which is the first chronologically,
that's when I would read
was not the first written. It was actually written later. So there's two ways to read them. I think Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, if you're going to start on something, is a great one to start with.
Yes.
And
It's probably upstairs.
yeah, probably. But his writing style, people like, is it Michael O'Brien?
No, Patrick.
Oh,
Patrick O'Brien.
Patrick O'Brien.
Yes.
And I tried to read the first one, and it's nothing like
Hornblower.
like the Hornblower books.
I think Wendell Berry really liked Patrick O'Brien at a point he was reading
Yeah.
a lot of him. I've
Yeah.
never tried it, but I just am not a water person. But now I've got to read Moby Dick
Yeah, you like to go to the beach.
and sit on the sand and look at it.
Well, okay, you got to
Yes.
remember that a lot of these sailors at that time were not water people either. A lot of them couldn't swim.
And the food, worms crawling around in your food. I'm just
Oh.
not. We have Stowaway as a read aloud in 5th grade. Woo,
Oh, there is a great.
there's a lot of those.
There's
boat
one
books.
story, and I think it's in Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, where they're carrying a cargo of rice, and they get in. I think they get into a battle or something, and one of the cannonballs comes in near the water line. Well, of course, as every cook knows, rice expands, and so he's trying to get to the place he's trying to get to. I think they had taken the ship from the French or something. They're trying to get back to England. Well, water's coming in there now, and the rice is expanding, and all of a sudden these rats start coming out from underneath the ship because they're just being squeezed out. And I mean, and it is one of the most exciting stories you'll ever read. It's very vivid.
And Tanya has a thing with rice.
and rats.
Yes.
I don't like either one.
Well, on a ship, particularly in those days.
That's what you're going to have.
I know. Which is why I don't like to do that.
His writing is very vivid and concrete, and just everything that makes a good writer he's got.
We are way off.
We are. Are
Way
you
off.
reading anything
What's-
for fun?
Well,
You're
I'm
reading two at the
I'm
same time,
reading,
right?
Yes, a Mick Herron book because I'm in that mode right now, and I'm reading The Name of the Rose. So I'm doing both.
I'm reading a book right now that we're looking at for Parnassus Prize inclusion, and I'm going to vote for it, which is Close Reading by John Guillory. And there's this term, close reading, and it gets used by the old new critics of the middle of the 20th century who really dominated how we read and literary criticism and all this stuff. And so I kind of have read a lot about that anyway. So I was interested in close reading was one of the things that it's associated with the new critical movement. And so there's basically what is it? And there's differing definitions, and he's trying to kind of put it together into a coherent way of reading. And then I've gotten back to Portrait of a Lady, and I'm just really enjoying that right now. James, with Henry James, every word is the precise right word to say what he's saying.
Did he edit and edit and edit?
I don't know. I don't know anything about how he wrote his books, but they're all that way. And the characters are so finely drawn, but there's things that are always kept from you as the reader as he's talking about somebody.
You mentioned Henry James, and it brought something to mind where I just recently read something that was critical of him. And I think it was out of I'll Take My Stand, the 12 Southern Agrarians. I think it was in an essay. I'm going to have to go back and find that.
People are critical of him.
Yeah.
Like I read somebody else that was critical, another author that was critical of him.
I
just
didn't slow
like
down
him at
long
all.
enough to figure out why, but I did. When I read it, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," and just kept going. But I'm gonna have to go back and figure out why now.
Well, I think he doesn't tell you everything his own characters are thinking,
right?
And so there's still this mystery he leaves for you to figure out. But there's something about that that's.
I need to go back and reread Portrait of a Lady.
Yeah, well, it's about a lady who makes a bad marriage. And I don't know what the consequences of it are yet, but a friend of mine had read it recently, and we were talking about it. And she said, I'm really mad at Henry James. I'm really mad at Isabel, the chief character, for doing what she did, because you love this character. She's a wonderful person.
But made a bad
Catharsis right
choice.
there.
There's something
Bad
about her
choice.
decision,
That's like that reminds me of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. That is the thesis of that book as well.
Yeah.
And just the plight of woman not being able in that time to do anything. I mean, you're just stuck with what is an awful human being.
Your lot in life.
Yes.
Well, maybe on to more uplifting things. Answering a listener question. Like I said earlier, we get a lot of questions about book lists. And Heather wrote us, and she asks, where do I, as an adult who didn't have a classical education, start? I could work my way through the elementary literature material that MP supplies, or perhaps that would give me a good foundation. I feel so very far behind where I could be. And then she says that she'll be homeschooling her 4 grandchildren and she feels unprepared as far as literature goes. But she knows that if she's learning along with her grandkids, that she'll eventually get to the level of Anna Karenina or Plato. She says, after all, I've heard on the podcast that it's possible to learn Latin as I teach it, beginning with Prima.
Yeah, that's all exactly right.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to feel unprepared because she can, especially, 4 grandchildren, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of different things to read, and chances are she's not going to be able to read them all.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's going to have to pick and choose. There is no way that you could read unless they're doing some things together.
Would you say, yes, read alongside or even a little bit ahead of your grandchildren as they're working through the curriculum, but then would you pair that reading with anything else? Something that we recommend for people starting with classical education as adults, maybe like a book about the framework of classical education or something else?
Well, sure. I feel like, though, I do think, like, I was trying to learn the curriculum that Cheryl had chosen, but she also handed me Climbing Parnassus because she wanted me to understand what classical education is. I feel like Heather isn't really asking that question. It looks to me like she knows what it is, even though she didn't get it, but she recognizes what it is. So maybe at this point, I would recommend that it's sure if she can get to it, but I would say get the literature, especially, just get all of those novels for those 4 grandchildren and read them through the summer, which that's not that just read through them. Don't study them, just know where they're going. And then when you go back through them with the grandchildren, then at that point, she will be studying them alongside them. But I really think if you can have whatever you can get done in the summer before you start is a huge help. And I think it helped me so much to know where my students would be at the end of the year.
Makes sense. Anybody else?
I'm still stuck on Tanya telling our listener how she should feel, but
Therapy with Tanya.
I got distracted. Everything else Tanya said after that, I was just focused on that.
Would you like to help also emotionally?
No, I try not to tell people how to feel.
But but she feels guilty. She feels unprepared. And I don't think she should feel that way.
I agree with that. I would say, rather than telling her how she should feel, I would say that maybe it's of some comfort that in like the lists of books that we give people, I think there's books on any of that list, except all of us, except for maybe Martin, that we haven't read.
That's exactly right.
You know, and the list that I'm looking at right now has the Count of Monte Cristo, and I had to convince Martin to read that a few years ago, right? And so
and now it's on his list.
Now it's on the list, right? And so I think people need to realize that these lists are aspirational. If you read those books, they will be helpful, but they are not meant to be exhaustive lists.
Plus, this comes in stages. So I just recently did teacher training for a brand new startup school in Lebanon, Tennessee called Imago Classical Academy that is being started by 2 former teachers that were mentored by Cheryl Lowe.
Wow.
So I'm very excited to see them then come full circle and start their own school in Tennessee. And so I had these lists. And, you know, I'm talking, as I talk all the time, about just continuing to educate yourself, being a lifelong learner. But then for that particular school, I had to say, don't do any of this right now. Learn your curriculum. Just read your books. But then, and we would say that to any of our new teachers here, but then now I'm starting to get emails from our teachers who have been teaching for years, who know their curriculum, and they're ready to read the books that their students are going to study later, or the books that they have studied in the past so that they know the context. So it really is stages. And at this point, getting ready to homeschool 4 children, I would say just concentrate on their curriculum. But that doesn't mean you ever get finished. You never get finished. There's always more books.
Well, I think you also have to ask the question, what do well-read people do? You know?
Read more?
Read more. But what do they read more of? Because one of the things that I do, because part of learning the canon, if you want to say that, is sort of following the links, right? So I'm reading the Wall Street Journal's review section every Sunday. It's book reviews. You know, you don't have time to read as many books as you would like to read. But if you don't have time to read them, reading reviews of them is a great little, because it'll bring out things in the book, and you can determine whether you want to read it or not, whatever. And so but there's also references that book reviewers are making all the time. And you get to learn those because you see multiple writers who are reviewing books refer to them, and you realize, oh, that writer is important. And then you go try to find that writer, and you know that. And also to read writers who talk about books. I would strongly recommend reading Joseph Epstein. Joseph Epstein is probably our greatest living American writer. He's an essayist. He doesn't write novels. He writes essays, but he's always writing on books. And he's read everything. And he's read all the great books. And he refers to them when he's talking about other books. And so you can get anything by Joseph Epstein and learn about books. That's not reading the actual classics. You need to do that too. That needs to be your main thing, and you need to identify those writers. You know, Tolstoy and Austen and Bronte, and all that. But to also read about them, and it makes everything more interesting. I think to know more. You get interested in something when you know more about it.
Sure.
And I think that's a great process to try to go through.
Well, let's maybe take some categories of people, because we get the question about book lists from several different types of questioners. So we've got Heather, who's starting homeschooling, and that was very helpful to just say, hey, major on the majors and just focus on what your students are reading. And you touched on teachers who've had some years of experience in the classroom, and then they kind of get the breathing room to expand forward or backward to kind of fill out the context. When we think about the person, an adult who's new to classical education, but they may not be in a classroom setting, are there a couple books that you would encourage them to read to situate themselves in classical education? Or they maybe feel like, I'm new to this, I love what I'm seeing, but I don't even know where to begin. I'm so far behind.
Well, the other thing you have to do is you have to be able to defend especially if you're going to be a proponent of classical education, you've got to be able to defend it. You've got to know why Latin, why the ancient civilizations of Greece and Rome. So I think that's the first.
Well, I think I had made up a classical educators book list, right?
Which we're going to post, right? Or is it posted somewhere? Is that
I don't think so.
Which one? That I believe is not posted, but we will post it.
This is your list, isn't it?
Well, that was a team list.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
That was
the schools division.
We worked together to put that together.
And this is again, these are primary works.
Not all.
It's
Because you've got, this is broken down into books about classical education,
yes,
great books, other helpful books about for classical educators, other helpful Christian books, and 6 modern Christian novels, right?
But I think there's several different kinds of books about classical education. There's the history of classical education, right? And Climbing Parnassus, Tracy Lee Simmons gives some of that in there, very tailored towards Americans.
you don't have your list. Do you have your list?
I have it in my.
I brought what Martin
I have
said.
it on my phone here. And Edith Hamilton's books, The Greek Way and the Roman Way, which talk about the two
still
cultures.
on my list. I have not read them.
Oh my gosh, you will love them. And then so there's the history of classical education. There's the philosophy of classical education. Those are slightly different kinds of books. So In Defense of Classical Education by Livingston is one of those. Werner Jaeger's books, I've got those all on the list. Also, The Practice. What does it consist of, right?
Well, this is mostly by you.
What?
The Practice.
Well,
by
yeah,
Martin
because
Cawthron, by Martin Cawthron, by Martin Cawthron.
Yeah. I mean, that's the guy you want to read. I have a book which will come out at one point of all my essays on classical education over the years, so that will help. But the idea
and this
proposal
one's
by
only
Mortimer
by
Adler.
William.
Why Johnny William Kilpatrick? Yes.
Got it.
And
It
then,
may have cut off.
yeah, I thought I had another fourth category, but I don't think I do. Okay, yeah. So those are
It
those
is
are
4.
four
That
different.
is 4. History, philosophy, practice, how to teach. Oh, no. What is?
I think that's all right. Yeah, it's 3. So those are the 3 kinds of the history, the philosophy, and the practice. And you want to read something of all those, but particularly if you're a teacher, you're interested in the practice of it. And
Okay.
I'm always writing stuff on that. I'm working on some articles on pedagogy right now, so that will go on that list.
And we will post that list for people who couldn't write or type
yes,
fast
we need
enough.
to clean it up.
Yes,
Huh?
we will post that.
Mine's
Is
fine. I
there-
don't know where yours came from. Mine's good.
It was an email.
See?
Is there a book that you would start with that helped you the most?
Well, I think, if you ask that question, I really, I actually have an essay on here that would be a short introduction. The Yearnings of the Pre-Christian World by Fulton Sheen, which we published in The Classical Teacher at one point.
So you
I
can
think
find
that's
that
a
on
really
our
great
website.
little introduction. Yes, on our website, The Yearnings of the Pre-Christian World, Fulton Sheen, who was a Catholic bishop, and very, very well-educated gentleman. But after that, I'd say, maybe just Tracy Lee's book, Climbing Parnassus, I think is a great.
It is so readable.
It really is. He's a really
He's
good
just
writer.
a really good writer. He's
Yes.
a wordsmith.
He is.
So it's not just he's not just giving you information. He's doing it in a way that, that a beginner can actually read and understand.
He's a journalist, so he writes in a journalistic way that you can really understand.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And the other one that I was thinking of is if you were to pair that with Cheryl Swope's Simply Classical.
Yes.
Because
Especially the beginning.
yes, the beginning
Yes.
part, but
Yeah.
also the entire book is that classical education is not just for the hardworking, rigorous student, but it's for every child.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think actually the ideals that show up in Climbing Parnassus, you pair that with Simply Classical, and you see that there is this vision for everyone. I think that's kind of a nice. If you were to read 2 books,
Yeah.
that's what I would do.
I think that's helpful. And if you've read Climbing Parnassus, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners have, there's a lot in this list that they may not have read.
That's right.
So there's plenty more material to go from.
And if you don't have time for the books, we have a pamphlet series that you can get all of our articles from the catalogs on our website by subject. So there are shorter, simpler things that you can do.
And I like, Paul, how you gave the option of reading something and pairing with it other books. Because like we were talking about before we hit record, that you can layer your reading, even though, Tanya, I know you don't prefer to.
No, but
You
I
can-
do. But I
Yeah.
do layer it. Yes, because I do need to. I need some relaxation time, and some of these books would be work, to get through. But it is, turning myself into a lifelong learner, and I feel like that's really important that I keep growing. And the more I read, the older I get, the more I feel like these books are not about Christianity at all, but I do feel like they also work side by side in my spiritual life, especially books of fiction, really good books of fiction. And I think they help me as a Christian as well to know how to live.
They're
You
edifying.
look bored.
Oh my.
I always look this way
Do you
when
disagree?
you talk.
And Paul, the book that you...
I agree with Tanya. I just, before you get to your question, that some of the most life-changing books that I have read have been fiction.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You just have to read them that way,
Yeah.
as opposed to reading them just as pure entertainment.
Well, can I
Right.
say something else too? And that is because some of these books are hard, right? Like you were sort of saying when I was not listening to you.
Oh.
But they're so if you are not used to this kind of literature, this can be really hard. And I think it's actually one way to do that, to get sort of a running start, the great books, is to read the books that have been written for not necessarily children, but young people, all those great books, Charlotte's Web and Triumph of the Swan and Little House on the Prairie and Heidi, those are great books in and of themselves, and you shouldn't feel guilty doing that and taking that approach.
No, and one of the most popular things we ever get asked for, especially at conferences, is your list of essential books for boys and essential books
Yes.
for girls.
Which are
and
on our
adults
website.
take those.
Yes.
They are, and we'll post them. We can link them in the show notes, but
Right.
they are. I mean, some of them are Little House in the Big Woods, but then some of them are Anna Karenina. Or so
They go
they do
basically
range.
by grade from picture books all the way through high
Oh yeah, you've got
school.
War and Peace on there. So
Yes, Moby Dick.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and because some people, they want to start too hard. I think I'm going to read Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky.
Right.
I said, no, don't do it. Just
That's right. It's-
read Tolstoy first, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
And
'Cause
that's
that
where we
will-
all had to start.
Yeah.
We had to start.
You can crash and burn.
Read
really easily.
Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
I'm amazed at the adults in my sphere who never read Anne of Green Gables before, but then read it as an adult and thought
So
it was
moved.
life changing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Her bend in the road when she gives up her lifelong dream
Mm-hmm.
to take care of Marilla. I mean, that is life changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a spiritual help.
Mm-hmm. And toward the goal of formation, especially for teachers, whether it's in your homeschool or the classroom, these are not just throwaway. There's something more cerebral and academic about Climbing Parnassus, or
Right.
any of the other books we've mentioned about history or philosophy or the practice of education. These too will greatly enhance the way that you
It will feed
interact.
your soul. That's what
Exactly.
literature is supposed to do.
We've also got this list. This is everything, all the literature books that we read in our curriculum, starting with Little Bear in the first grade and going all the way through the Divine Comedy.
Does
And
that include all the read alouds, or this is just the
No.
books that they?
That's a good question. I think it's it's got the summer reading because it has Great Expectations, The Man Who Was Thursday,
But those are still books
but it
that
doesn't
the
have
children are
like
expected
those
to read.
American history read alouds on it, and it doesn't have the K-2 read alouds. But it also has the classical history that we read, all of the primary authors that we're reading, the Greek tragedy, Cicero, Plato, Aristotle, all your metaphysics books are on here. And it's got what we read for Christian studies. For some reason, Latin and Greek's on here. I don't know why. Logic
the
and
books they
rhetoric is
read.
on here.
That's right.
And some educational resources, a few educational resources. So we can post that too. The nice thing about this is it got a little checklist so you can go through
That's right.
and see what you have read and what's left to read just to even get your students through the curriculum.
And there are a lot of overlap between that book and then the essential books for boys and girls.
Yes,
So
I'm
it's
sure.
not like you're going to be looking at lists that have everything's different on every list you have. There's
That's
a
right.
lot of overlap.
Yes.
I think another thing that we need to clarify here is the difference between all of these books we're talking about and the great books that we study at Memorial College. So do we have that list of the great books? I think I put the question in a chat, but I didn't get an answer. Did we?
We
get
did.
that?
We posted that in an episode.
Because that's Adler's list.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, I think we recently
So we
did
do
that.
already have that posted.
Yeah, I mean, we
So
could.
what is the difference in the great books and these books?
These
Well,
are the
some
good
of
books.
them will be, and some of them will be the same, correct?
Yeah, you'll find War and Peace in both.
Mm-hmm.
But the great books, well, and actually we just published on Memorial College
.org.
.org.
a blog post by Joseph Pierce about the distinction between great books and great conversation.
Oh,
And like when you're talking about a program and you're looking at, do they teach the great books or do they teach the great conversation? Which is funny because everything we use in marketing is great. We call it a great book program, but in the way he's created this division or this distinction, I'd say we're a great conversation program because his distinction is the great books. If you're reading as a program, you're starting chronologically and you're just reading through. And in that sense, like Plato never gets a chance to respond to Aristotle because Aristotle comes chronologically after him, right? Or Aquinas never gets a chance to respond to
Aristotle.
Aristotle never gets a chance to respond to Aquinas,
I see.
or Aquinas doesn't get to respond to any of the modern people because
right.
chronologically. And Joseph Pierce is making the point that like in a great conversation program, you would absolutely, once you hit Aristotle, could then go back and say, okay, well, then how would Plato respond to this? Like if we fully understand what Plato's saying, right? And so when we're talking about the great books, we're talking about this conversation that's been happening. And yes, it's chronological, but you have people that are, for example, Platonists that live after Aristotle that are bringing those ideas back. And so this is all a back and forth philosophically, ethically, theologically, scientifically. I mean, all the domains of human knowledge is part of this great conversation. And
But it would be hard to have that by yourself,
correct. Yes.
which is why it's called a conversation, I get. But the conversation is between the different writers.
Authors. And we are
But-
participating in that
Right.
and learning
But
their
it
stuff
would-
and discussing
I don't
it.
think I could do that by myself.
Well, right. That's what the college is for.
Right.
But when we're talking about lists, the list of the great books that Adler puts together are like the most important works that are continuing that conversation through the ages. And so there are works on, I mean, what are the domains? I mean, he's doing philosophy, literature, theology, history, science,
etc.
law, all of those, it's not that he took a domain and said, these are just the great books of literature. He said, we're taking all the domains of human knowledge and trying to put together a list where all of those things are in conversation. Because we didn't have this uber specialization until recently. And so your early scientists of the 20th century were aware of the philosophical implications of their scientific proposals, which may not be the case.
They
today.
were all classically educated.
Yeah.
And if somebody wanted to join the conversation, they could, do we point them to Memoria College?
Well, I do think we need to say something about the blog because I don't know that we've talked about it before. But Better Things, which is the English translation of our journal title, which is Meliora, and we have a number of articles there. We have a lot of articles by Joseph Pierce, as Paul mentioned, and a number of
So
other
do you
people.
just Google Better Things and it comes
Well,
up?
here's what I was going to say. Just go to memoriacollege.org and look on, it needs to be more prominently put on there, but look under publications and then you'll see Better Things blog and then click there.
I've never looked at that.
And do you have Great Books classes that someone could join?
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
what the college is. So so you can go there and look at the classes. We have the classes up for the summer. We have summer classes coming. So
And
Are you studying it for a master's in chronological order?
No.
Or it's just random,
I
whatever?
mean, we're every term offering, trying to offer a variety of different kinds of courses, right? So make sure there's something on philosophy, make sure there's something on literature, make sure there's something on science, and so then the student, because students are joining all the time, can then pick what's appropriate to them or what they want to, what they want to learn in the requirements of the master program. But you don't actually have to be a master's student to attend the course.
Right.
Really?
So,
Is
yeah.
that an auditing status or?
The core courses, there's no distinction. You're going to sign up. You're going to be a 4-credit student in that core course. The seminars, you could be an auditing student or a non-auditing student or a credit student, which those are the 5 weeks. So we've got the 15, 16-week core courses. You've got the 5-week seminar courses, and you can just, so if you sign up for the list to be informed of when these course offerings are put up and stuff, you could just see one class and go, I want that one class. And that's
Right.
all you got to do.
Oh, nice.
You
Okay.
know?
yeah, and there's the core classes are kind of set. There's 14 or 15 of them, and they're offered on a rotating basis. But the seminars, I guess we have taught a particular seminar more than once, but
It's rare.
oftentimes we'll just say, Tracy Lee Simmons teaches for us, and we'll say, Tracy, what's on your mind? Well, I'm reading Brideshead Revisited right now. I could do a class on that. Yeah, and so we do it, and so it's something that you're going to get fresh from the mind of the teacher, and they're always different. Although there's certain themes that kind of come. Children's literature, Vegan Groin's done a couple courses I think on that, so those are things. It's those seminars. I think those are 5-week seminars that our listeners might be more interested in. They're short. You can take them for credit or non-credit, but it's geared toward discussion. Everyone reads the work, and you come to class and you talk about it, and really, it's in a discussion. I find myself that I learn more.
Oh, definitely.
So that's what we do.
And if you can't make it to one of those seminars, we would probably encourage you to read this with a friend who wants to do it too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you were mentioning the teachers who just started the school in Tennessee.
Right.
They
Yes.
probably were friends together reading and thinking about education before they started a school.
Yeah, and a lot of schools do have teacher book groups where they actually go through something like the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid together, helping each other be lifelong learners. Yeah, that's a great thing to do. I think we did Dante here. I didn't finish it, but Kyle Yonke did that with us. And, there's talk of doing more. Memoria Press.
We have a book club.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Where it does help to be able to have the conversation. It may not be a great conversation.
Well, and I mean, just the Memoria Press book we're reading right now, The Name of the Rose, like I wanted to read that again. I kept putting it off. And even once it was assigned as this is what we're doing, I kept putting it off because I had other stuff I wanted to read. And then I'm like, okay, I'm getting close. Now I'm going to actually read it. And so it's just helpful for accountability too.
It is.
Where you
To
actually
have a deadline.
Yeah,
That's
your
right, or it'll sit
aspirations
there
become
forever.
reality.
Right.
That's good. Well, we've thrown a lot at people, but we have it all organized in book lists. And And I'm encouraged. I think these lists are definitely digestible. You can choose what works for you depending on what stage you're at and get to work. Well, thanks everybody for being here, for bringing all your lists. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.